I'm going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for June 21st, 2023. Welcome all those present and the interactive ones online. First thing is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Recording in progress.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I would like a motion to approve the amended meeting agenda.
I move to approve the amended meeting agenda. Judy.
This is Bethany. I'll second.
Any opposed? I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye.
Barb, aye. Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye. The next approval is for the minutes of a public hearing on June 1st, 2022 for the Consilla Acres Second Edition Preliminary and Final Plat.
This is Barb. So moved to approve.
There a second?
I'll second. Judy.
Opposed? I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Next is the approval from June 1st, 2022, public hearing minutes for the Southwest Quad preliminary and final plat. Is there a motion?
This is Barb. So moved to approve.
This is Bethany. I'll second.
Opposed? I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Next is the approval of the April 5th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
This is Bethany. So moved.
This is Barb. I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Lynn, aye. Next approval is for the May 3rd, 2023 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
This is Barb. Motion to approve. This is Judy. I'll second.
I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Now I'll call for approval of the May 3rd, 2023 public hearing minutes, the special interim use permit for running ACES events.
This is Judy. I'll make a motion to approve.
This is Bethany. I'll second.
Call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Lynn, aye. The next is a motion to approve the May 3rd, 2023 public hearing minutes for the conditional use permit for the planned unit development Columbus Industrial Park.
Motion to approve. This is Bethany.
I'll second. Judy.
Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye. Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye. Okay. So now I'm going to open a public hearing for a conditional use permit amendment for the Construction Technology Incorporated at 13305 Humber Street Northeast, the expansion of use, additional garage condo building, pages 1 through 18, and the enclosure E1 through E12. And who is the applicant for that project? Do you want to come forward, have a seat at the table, give your name and address, and make sure you speak into the microphone, please?
Madam Chair, if I could read the public hearing notice real quick.
Pardon me?
If I could read the public hearing notice real quick. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the City of Columbus Planning Commission on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023 at 6 p.m. or as soon thereafter as parties may be heard. The hearing will be conducted in person and by interactive technology at the Columbus City Hall located at 16319 Kettle River Boulevard, Columbus, Minnesota, to consider a request to amend the existing conditional use permit to add one additional building to the facility at 13305 Humber Street Northeast. Members of the public interested in attending in person, monitoring the meeting, or wanting more information should contact the city offices at 651-464-3120 or visit the city website at columbusmn.us. The hearing shall continue until all evidence and testimony have been received. The applicant is Construction Technology Incorporated, property owners CIC number 320 Garage Solution Condominiums. And the property location is 13305 Humber Street Northeast, Columbus, Minnesota. Legal description, they're imprinted. And this is signed by Elizabeth Marsko.
Thank you. Okay, now you can give your name and address.
Joe Basie, President of Construction Technology. Address is 1798 Lapis Ledge Court, Henderson, Nevada.
Okay, the commission has reviewed your application, and as normal protocol for the record, could you give us a brief description and a little bit about your plans?
Well, hopefully you're all familiar with my project, with the garage condominium project down on Lake Drive. I just want to add another building that's going to consist of 15 more units. Due to just demand for more spacing, majority of them will probably be sold to my current owners that want additional space. So everything will be consistent with what we have there currently, just it's a little smaller building is all, but same color, same layout. So I'm not sure if anybody has questions on what we've done there, but because I know all of you are new since I've added any buildings.
Okay, and for the record, did you receive a copy of the staff report developed by RSC Dean Johnson dated June 14th, 2023? Regarding this application, the report notes certain findings numbered 1 to 22. And do you understand the recommendations and conditions, and do you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I do. I did read it. I don't have any, I didn't see any issues at all. It's pretty standard stuff that we've done all along, so not a problem.
And Dean, did you have any thoughts to pass on?
I like what he said. It's pretty standard. So I'd prefer to answer questions if you have them rather
Okay.
than bore you with a presentation.
Okay.
But I'm happy to do either.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Then I will ask, do you have any questions?
I don't.
Nope.
No, I think it's a very fine use of the property.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm going to open it up to the public. If anybody has any interest or discussion in this project, if they want to come forward. Anybody online? Okay, we will now close the public hearing and open the floor for the Planning Commission members. And nobody, I think it's a great idea, so.
Yeah, I don't have, I'm with Barb. It's like,
Yeah.
Yep,
yeah.
it's a great addition to the city. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So I would look for a motion.
You want to go ahead?
This is Judy Huntash. Motion to recommend approval of the Construction Technology Incorporated at 13305 Humber Street Northeast conditional use permit amendment for expansion of use for one additional garage condominium building based on findings of fact number 1 through 13 and recommendations number 1 through 22 of the planner's report dated June 14th, 2023, and findings of fact of the engineer's report dated June 15th, 2023.
Is there a
This is
second?
Bethany. I'll second.
Okay, motion second.
Judy, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
And Lynn, aye.
Thank you.
So this will be presented to the city council next Wednesday on June 28th at 6 PM, right here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the discussion for Chapter 7A, swimming pool fencing requirements, pages 10 through 74, with an addition, pages A1 through A7 and a handout. And I believe, Frank, you're going to go over that for us?
Yep, I'll be taking this one tonight. So today we have a draft for proposed ordinance amendment. Most of the amendments in this are small capitalization corrections. However, there are a couple of changes that are larger than that. And Elizabeth, actually, if you could pull up the presentation, it's in the subfolder there. Thank you. So I will start by discussing our swimming pool ordinance, which is section 7A 807, and tonight we'll be mostly looking at subsection K regarding fencing. So why are we doing pool fences? Well, if you could go to the next slide, please. In December 2021, automatic pool covers were added to the code as a substitute for a fence 5 feet or higher. However, during 2022, the city received some inquiries about the required fence height for above-ground pools. This included a direct inquiry in October 2022 by a resident to study fence heights requirements for above-ground pools. So if we could go to the next slide. So to research this and to understand some of the more basic parts of pool fence rules, such as if there were state building code rules, I first spoke with Dean just to get me headed in the right direction, and then Derek Wyman, a plan reviewer at MinSpect, which is the city's designated building official. I also got Derek's perspective regarding other communities that he reviews. I also reviewed safety barrier guidelines for residential pools from the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, and you can find those guidelines in your main packet from pages 29 to 48. Finally, I looked at existing ordinances in several other cities, which you can see listed on the screen. I tended to stick to ones that were either directly adjacent to Columbus or on the Metro Fringe, which kind of similar land uses, and then some ones that Derek from MinSpect had brought up in our conversation. So if we could, I'll start off here in just a second with some of my findings about above ground pool rules. On the next slide, perfect. So after researching potential rules for above ground pools, I made some key findings. First, while it's not shown on this slide, the U.S. Consumer Safety Product Commission recommends either a removable ladder or a gated entrance for above ground pools. Several cities in the region do have specific rules for above ground pools, but they vary in detail, as you can see with the chart on the screen. I'll start with the most basic one, which is Corcoran. That is very basic. It's just a 4-foot requirement for the sidewalls of the pool as an adequate substitute for a fence. Now, Hugo and Lake Elmo do both still require fences for pools above 42 inches. Hugo requires a removable ladder for pools with wall heights between 24 inches and 42 inches, while Lake Elmo requires a removable ladder for all pools with a depth greater than 24 inches. And Blaine does require, as you can see on the top there, above ground pool to only have one entry and exit point, and that is to remain in place when the pool has water in it, and the entry point must be surrounded by a barrier. Now, North Oaks has language that states pools the pool is exempt from a complete enclosure, but it must have a barrier surrounding the entry and exit point. And Ramsey requires that pools have removable steps, but that fencing is not required. It also has a provision that pools with decks require a 36-inch guardrail. Ramsey's ordinance is probably the most similar to the recommendation by the U.S. Consumer Safety Product Commission for pools with removable ladders. And based on national guidelines, as well as reviewing other cities in the region, I would propose adding ordinance language that is specifically about above-ground pools. Now, before I move on to the next couple slides, I do want to take a quick pause. I don't know if there's any questions. That was a lot thrown there. There's a few different things. So if anyone has any immediate questions, I'm more than happy to answer them just to kind of clarify.
Yes, hi, I have one question. You'd said which city's ordinances was much or was more like ours, or which city was more like ours?
Okay, for the record, can you state your name and address?
Jennifer Willetsko.
Okay, and your address, please?
182nd Lane.
Okay.
So in regards to which one is more similar to ours, because these all have specific rules, there were several of the cities that I looked at, like Forest Lake, I know didn't have a specific rule. Bayport didn't, so those would be a little bit more similar to ours. However, I did state that Ramsey is probably the most similar to the U.S. Consumer Safety Product Commission for pools with removable ladders.
That's what I missed. Thank you. That was it. Thank you.
All right. And then I'm happy to take any other questions. All right, so I guess I will move along. While I was doing research for above ground pools, I did make some other findings regarding pools in general that I want to propose as well, since we're looking at this subsection. First, gate rules. So we do not have any ordinance language regarding self-closing or self-latching gates. And this was brought to my attention when I was talking to the plan reviewer from MinSpect regarding fence heights. This is also a recommendation by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Further, I noticed quite a few cities specify the self-closing and self-latching gates. You can see those listed on the screen. Ramsey actually specifies that the latch should be 4 feet above the ground level. And based on my findings, I would propose adding language to the ordinance that will require a self-closing and self-latching gate. And moving on to my other additional findings slide, pool covers. So as mentioned earlier, the city adopted an amendment in December 2021, which included an additional provision to allow an automatic cover to substitute for a pool fence. And it was brought to my attention when I was speaking to the plan reviewer at MinSpec that the specific statute from ASTM International, the statute is F1346, is not mentioned. And this statute is cited by the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Also, the cities that have provisions for automatic pool covers all specify that specific statute. Additionally, Bayport details that the cover must be key locking. And based on this information, I propose adding what ASTM statute is being referenced, just for clarity for residents, what is being asked of them in the ordinance. And further, I also propose adding that the cover is to be locked with a key. So I'll pause one more time just for these 2 slides, just if there's any questions before I present some of the proposed ordinance amendments.
When you say locked with the key versus what?
Versus just, I believe, like, I think this is just to clarify so people aren't just like putting automatic pool covers that can just switch on and off, if I understand the technology correctly. Or I shouldn't say switch on and off. If, oh, if you can actually go back, Elizabeth, one slide. Oop. Perfect. So if you kind of see there, these are automated. They'll slide in and then they'll slide out. I would assume that most of them already have something that it's key operated, but I guess maybe there's some designs that maybe have a switch. This is another thing that was brought to my attention by Derek Wyman. He mentioned that Bayport's was the most specific regarding these ASTM standards for pool covers. He kind of said that this is something sort of new. We're actually one of the first cities to kind of adopt this in the region. A lot of cities don't kind of think about this. So he mentioned that was a good basis for potential rules regarding automated pool covers.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I assume the goal with the key is that like a kid couldn't wander into your yard and push a button and then fall into your pool. Is that the idea? Like it's just making it more guarded, like who can open and close it?
Correct.
And I agree with that, but let's just be honest, nobody's going to get in it if you have a fence around it. And if you're going to, my opinion, if you're going to own a pool, you should take the responsibility and fence it in.
In addition to the cover?
Yeah, in it, because those covers, you can, not all of, some of them are pretty sturdy, but some of them, somebody could fall on and go.
Yeah, I don't
Go
think the
down.
ones that they're referencing here, that you could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in addition to, I think that there should be a fence around it.
So, one thing I looked up was, unfortunately, the current ASTM F1346 standard is behind a paywall, so I can't access what is currently up without a payment. But I did find a relatively up-to-date version of the standard, and I don't think there'd be, these aren't amended that much, it seems like. And I will say, just so it's understood, the weight, I had it up just a second ago. So the static load from the periphery to the cover, in the case of a pool with the width or diameter greater than 8 feet from the periphery, the cover shall be able to hold a weight of 485 pounds. So that's 2 adults and 1 child to permit a rescue operation. So that is, if we adopt, and that's why I kind of want this specific statute in here, I think that might take care of some of the concern regarding kind of, more shoddy sort of pool covers. That's also kind of why I wanted the gate latching thing is, if
Well,
Bob
and
built his
those
own gate.
covers are for in-ground pools. So there's a difference between the in-ground pool and, like, I had an above-ground pool, but it was dug into the ground, so only 2 feet stood up above, and we had a deep end. So, but it was not an in-ground pool, so you could not do one of those covers. So there's a lot of different variables here.
Sure.
That cover is made for an in-ground pool.
I have a question. Actually, I might have missed this when I scanned what you sent, but just if there's language about when it needs to be closed and when it's like, do people leave it open? Or if like they leave it open when they're not using it, is that still in line with the ordinance, or is there language about closing it when you're not using it that would specify?
I do have language like that, I do notice for the above-ground pools. From what I took from the code, it doesn't specify when it needs to be closed. That's a good point out. And with that being said, I can take any other questions right away, and we can kind of keep moving through this. Getting good feedback.
Hi, this is Jennifer
I'm
Wilson.
sorry, but this is not a public hearing. So this is just the planning commission reviewing the ordinances.
Oh, I just had a question, sorry. I guess I'll wait for the public open forum and we'll revisit then.
All right, so let's see here. If we want to move to the next slide, Elizabeth. So let's see here. First, I'll start with the proposed above-ground pool rules. So you can see the proposed ordinance amendment at the bottom of the screen there, which was in your packet with housekeeping ordinance amendments. For above-ground pools, I propose adding specific rules. First, that fences are not required if the pool sidewall is higher than 4 feet. However, it would be required to include removable steps. Now, above-ground pools with surrounding decks would also have to feature a 3-foot high guardrail. And then if we want to move to the next slide, this one's going to be pretty easy. It just adds language that will specify a self-closing and self-latching device is placed at the top of the gate that is inaccessible to small children. And then finally, for the proposed automatic pool cover ordinance amendment. Now, what I had is it will add the specific ASTM statute F1346. Additionally, we should be specific that the cover is locking and key operated. Now, based on the feedback I've received tonight, I believe that there's a couple of flaws in the way that this is written, but it might be a fix that we can do. First, it sounds like we want just this to be clear, this automatic security cover is just for in-ground pools. So, and then, if I can, and if you want to turn to page A3, which is where this part of the section that's being amended is located. So if you look at, actually, even though we're talking about covers right now, if you look at number 3, which is above ground pools, this first sentence here, there's first comma, and then but shall have removable steps, and then the second comma, which shall be removed when the swimming pool is unattended. Now, if I added language like this, which would say instead, covers shall be locking, powered, and automatic and compliant with ASTM F1346, and which shall be closed when the swimming pool is unattended. Does the Planning Commission feel like that is a good sort of addition to what we have written down right now, just as a more security, more specificity?
Well, I think it's good language. I don't know how you ever enforce anything like that versus putting up a fence or making sure there's a lock, telling somebody that they have to have it closed when unattended. It's just such a...
It does, I would think, protect the city, right? Then if somebody said, oh, well, the ordinance doesn't say that I had to have it closed and this kid fell in, so it's not my fault, or, something like that. Like if the ordinance says it has to be closed.
Well, I like the verbiage in there.
Yeah. No, it is, I mean, it is hard to enforce, and people probably wouldn't usually do it because they like looking at the sparkly pool. But,
Yeah, and I'm not I'll say right now, I am certainly not a lawyer, but I think going into this, we shouldn't have too much concern about city liability, because there are some cities, and I talked about this with the plan reviewer, they don't have anything on the books. Now, Elizabeth, you're kind of looking at me like maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm more, if you have any feedback regarding that, I said I'm not Bill. I'm the associate planner, and I'm sure if anyone else has any knowledge on this subject.
You know, certainly we can leave a question on the record. When we have legal questions, it can come back to the planning commission, or a legal question goes to the council and it's answered. As far as liability goes, I think, you know, we have standards, you know, that they have to meet, and after that, the pool is on the property of the property owner.
Right.
And they take on the liability and responsibility of activities in and around that pool. What I do think is that looking at K, as the Madam Chair indicated, I think we do have to have, and I don't know if there are definitions of an in-ground pool and above-ground pool, because what you were describing was an above-ground pool that was in the ground partially.
Right.
And so,
Right.
again, when you have a fence or a rail that you're trying to, or a standard, then where are you measuring from? And so these are the kind of things when we get, you know, applications in, we look to the code for guidance and criteria of which we're looking at. So in this case, if we're going to have a standard, originally this was a one standard fits all. You have to have a 5-foot fence regardless whether you have an in-ground pool or above-ground pool, you were going to have a 5-foot fence. We made the deviation to have a pool cover because there was a resident that indicated, you know what, they wanted the in-ground pool, they owned 20 acres, they didn't want a fence, you know what I mean, inhibiting the pool. Would they be able to do a pool and I believe that there's, while it didn't lock, there was a code. They had to put a 4-digit code in. It wasn't a key, it was an actual code. So yes, you pressed the button and it opened, but you needed the code first before it would open. So that amendment was approved. As far as the 1346, our attorney generally doesn't like putting numbers in, but if that is specifically to pools, we can certainly add a number language for something more specific for safety issues. Bethany, as far as the language being unattended, you would think that would be, you know, what everybody would want, but as you indicate, some people, you know, do like the pools open all the time. So again, I think that's liability on the property owner, but
okay.
We can ask him whether the language is harmless, we can always add it in.
So here's just what, from a family that we all had pools, and there's a difference between in-ground pools and above-ground pools, because in-ground can go deeper, they can be way bigger. I get moving up here from the city, I have more space, and there might be people that don't want to put a fence up. So I think for an in-ground pool, because they do go deeper and they do run continually most of the time, it's either a fence or that cover. I mean, that cover would be something in place of a fence. I see up here a lot of people look at above ground pools and think, I don't need, I mean, when I had a pool, my first call was the insurance company to put a rider on my property and homeowners insurance for those reasons when people do get hurt. I don't know if everybody thinks that way, but that's how I think. And above ground pools in North St. Paul, the fence had to be above water level, not just above the side of the pool. So your water doesn't go all the way up to the top. So that's where you got to gain a little bit. But pool accidents happen, and I personally know people that found 3 little neighbor girls in their pool when they came home from out of town, and they had a fenced pool. The problem is their gate did not have a lock on it. So I think you have to, like my in-ground pool, I could put it in, I could only go 6.5 feet deep, but it's still, it was a 16 by 32 pool. So I think we have to be very clear and separate in-ground and above ground. And if you're gonna dig an above ground into the ground, you have to have some settings for that as well.
Yeah. I think can work on definitions for each.
So then another question is, if we're gonna say above, in-ground pools have to have that cover or a fence, are we gonna say above ground pools have to have a cover of some sort or a fence around it? Because some of those above ground pools are,
Okay, but the covers for above-ground pools would not be safe. They're the kind that you roll up.
Right,
And you can
right.
go under them.
yeah.
In number 3, could it not say all above-ground pools that have a minimum sidewall above ground? So if you sink it down, then automatically you are triggering a fence. And I don't think
Because a lot of people leave them up in the winter, they just drain them halfway down. This is what I did, and then you just put like beach balls in there and then put a cover over the top.
But it's not a safe cover. It is not a,
No, no,
like the new ones.
but I had a fence around mine,
And-
so, yeah.
But I think just identifying, so if somebody has one
Yep.
4 feet tall, now I still struggle with that a little bit. But if it's 4 feet above ground level, then you are deeming that not scalable, I guess, by a little kid.
And just to clarify, our current ordinance says 5 feet, whether it's an above-ground pool or
5-foot fence.
it requires a 5-foot fence. And that's what's been questioned. And I think we've seen criteria anywhere from 4 feet to 6 feet. So I think that would be the departure from what we currently have.
Okay.
So let's see here. So we're going to add minimum, have it be for number 3, all above ground pools that have a minimum sidewall height above ground of 4 feet. That's the next thing we'll add. Then I'll have to get definitions. Let's see, we're adding to the above. And then, is there, we haven't talked too much about number 1, which just kind of added the self-closing, self-latching devices at the top of the gate. I kind of want to leave this general because if there's any sort of fence or gate on the deck ones, that can still apply to that. But I'm also open to any suggestions as we're going through this discussion. Dean, you always have suggestions, and I love them.
In number 1, I was waiting till you opened that up. It says 1 gate. Why isn't it any gate? If you want self-closing, so you could have 2 gates and one of them required this and then the other one little kids can open. Why aren't all of them self-closing if you have more than 1 gate?
So some of it is that some pools will have gates that are for like vehicle access or are a little bit larger. So I'm wondering here then if we need to put something regarding one gate that is accessible, allowed, and then any other gate shall be locked. Because some people have pool fences just for bigger access for vehicles is what I've kind of seen in the various things that I've looked at.
You could simplify it, any passage gate. If they've got a automobile gate, that falls in a totally different category. But I was just concerned, my experience, I don't see people having multiple gates. But the way this reads, you could have 3 gates, but only one has to have self-closing. Why wouldn't they all be? And they should be at 4 feet at the top of the gate so kids can't reach them. That's my only comment.
And on the inside. Does it say that the latch should be on the inside of the gate?
This one that I used did not. I did see some that did say that. So we can do placed inside the pool area. And then above we'll do any gate shall be equipped with a self-closing, self-latching device. I don't know if there's any other thoughts on this, if we want to try and put something in for another type of access, but we can just kind of keep it simple. If we want to make just those 2 edits on this top one.
I'm just going to share something from the conversation that was had the last time this issue was brought up. If I'm remembering correctly, the idea of self-latching gates was brought up and we didn't require it, and part of the reason was because the resident that was bringing it up said they entertain, they go in and out, they're carrying trays of food and things like that, and it's a big pain. So then they end up propping it open, which completely defeats the purpose and actually makes it worse. So I'm with Elizabeth. I think you got to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're going to put this fence up, they're going to lock it or secure it when they're not around. And when they are around, they don't want the hassle of having to try to put the tray of margaritas down so they can reach over, open the fence up, and then try to pick it up before it closes again. I think you're not going to get a lot of support for that. So just think about that.
Well, I will say that this is, again, guidelines from best practices. I understand having people with the taking them for doing the best, but that doesn't always pan out. So, Elizabeth, you had something to say?
I was just saying, it's the consensus of the Planning Commission what they would like to do. You know what I mean? Whether they feel that that's an appropriate amendment.
Sure. I just want to point that out, sorry.
Question for Janet, when you said it makes it worse, like if they're propping it open when they're having like a big party where they're doing that, why does propping it open make it worse than like if it's just kind of open all night, if it's not a self-closing and it's just open all night?
I think because they sort of forget about it then. You know, that, again, if I'm remembering correctly, they were very conscious about the idea of making it safe for anybody who would be there, but they also didn't want to be inconvenienced when the whole reason for them having a pool was to entertain. And so that was going to be a problem for them if that was what we were requiring.
I don't see any problem, this is Barb, requiring it in the ordinance. People are going to do what they're going to do anyway. And it's just, I think, to be as safe as possible, they should all be self-latching. And if people are going to prop it open, they're going to do that anyway, even if it isn't self-latching. So don't know. That's
This is
just
the
my
first
gut.
time I don't know what I think in a meeting. I don't know what I think.
Well, and it's not, a lot of this is not for us to, I mean, I had 2 gates, but I went out my patio doors and my pool was right there. So you're not propping gates open going in and out. But if you do, there were times that we opened it and propped it open because we had people coming and going. It's your responsibility as a pool owner to lock it up at night and make sure that it's secure. I mean, we can put whatever ordinance out there we want, but if they don't follow it, it's only that good.
Yeah, that was my point.
That's my thought process.
Is that consensus of keeping the gate language in or taking it out?
Well, I think Mr. Johnson said it, that there's no reason not to. And whatever you do after that is your responsibility. So at least our conscience is clear that we made the safest choice. What do you say?
Well, and it's funny because coming from the city, everybody knew who had a pool because they had big fences, okay? You come up here and people have more property and don't really understand that, it should be, you should have a fence around it or, secured somehow, but people are more relaxed here. So you can't, you can only do what you can do and have the ordinance, and if they follow it, they follow it. I've seen my share of people that don't, so, Exactly.
Just for further clarification, was it the consensus of the planning commission that you felt 5 feet was too high and you were going to reduce it to 4 feet? You felt that was the way to go, or did you?
For the fence?
For the fence height, today the ordinance is 5 feet. Is there consensus that you want to change that requirement to something other than 5 feet for both an in-ground pool and a above-ground pool? Because that's, the policy question is whether or not we're going to reduce the height of the fence. Because that's been the question coming to staff. Why do we have to do 5 feet? And when Frank asked about the cost, I don't know whether you came up with a consensus, because that was my question. Is there a difference between a 4-foot fence, a 5-foot fence, and a 6-foot fence? Or is it, standard 6 feet? Because I know when we were buying fence for the park, standard fence is 6 feet. So were we cutting fence? Why was it more expensive, or just people didn't want to see the fence? So I don't know if you had any conclusion on that, but it seems across the board 4, 5, or 6 feet is used in other cities.
Well, as I said, from some of the sources that I did call into and got some answers from, one place that was just kind of a vinyl type fence, that's all they did. They actually said 4 and 5 feet were the same price for them, and that 6 was actually cheaper just because that's how it comes. Now, the other place that I called for just non-climbable fences, that ended up being, had the number, and my computer's dead. I think, if I remember right, it was $2 per linear foot between a 5-foot and a 4-foot fence. It's a little bit cheaper per linear foot. That adds up after you're going around the perimeter, so.
So are you talking the fence that you put on top of an above-ground pool?
This would be the one that I was just speaking about. That's just a non-climbable fence. The companies I called did pool fences, so.
I guess I would say that at least in my opinion, I was a little monkey when I was a kid. There's not really such thing as a 4-foot non-climbable fence. You just pull yourself up, yeah.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
I guess to me that doesn't exist.
I say leave it as it is, 5 feet.
What's that?
I'd say leave it as it is in the ordinance at 5 feet.
Yeah. I like 5.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Don't know if we have, because I don't know if I have an adequate definition for in-ground and above-ground pools, or if adding that provision about the height of the fence sidewall being above ground, if that's sufficient. So I don't know if we would have to come back to this at the next meeting. I don't know if you have any opinions, Elizabeth, regarding that.
I think the policy question, we answered whether or not whether the planning commission would be willing to recommend something less than a 5-foot fence for a pool. I think the definition comes into place, that 5-foot barrier, whether it's a fence, you talked about railing around the top, those sorts of things I think are other options. So an example here is for a in-ground pool, we said 5-foot fence or self-locking pool cover meeting X standard. For an above-ground pool, you might have criteria, it's a 5-foot fence around it or putting a gate 2 feet above whatever the definition is. And I think that's what, if the planning commission felt that that was appropriate, we do need to come back. You don't have that language in here, but again, we would need feedback from the planning commission saying, yes, we will look at other methods as long as it made up the 5 feet. Because you also have an example of a deck that has railings that go around the pool. And would that be appropriate? Because the railings go around the pool, but it's not a standard fence that's detached from the pool. And would that be an option? But that language would needs to be presented in the code. But again, if everyone in consensus says that's a good idea, then Frank will rewrite and come back with some language and pictures so that you can see exactly what that criteria looks like. And for those of us like Eleanor and myself that have to apply the rules, it gives us an opportunity to say, does this make sense? When an application comes in, can we apply this and does it work with the code? So if you're willing to do those options and that's the consensus, then we would bring it back at your next meeting.
See, I had a deck around, and then it was 2-tiered, so that was a little shorter. But then my neighbor had an above-ground pool without a deck, so then she bought the wire fence that goes on top of the rail of the pool, so, because she didn't have a deck.
And the language in our code doesn't address that. And I came back to the council because there was a person who proposed that. That language isn't in the code. It doesn't say that. Right. So I asked if that was a good interpretation, and they agreed at the time, but it would be awfully nice if that language was in the code that allowed either a 5-foot freestanding fence or railings, whatever you mean, either the railings from a deck or the railings on the pool.
Right. So the railings around the pool have to meet the same standards that on a deck? Because if you're talking an above-ground pool 4 feet high, now we've got a deck that's 4 feet high. So the railing around that, is that not even, wouldn't that be a requirement?
I would make it a requirement. So,
I mean,
but
I had to put it on my deck, so.
Well, they've got a picture here of that situation.
Well, I'm just wondering if that's code. And I don't know how stringent they are.
They're pretty sturdy.
Now, on something like this picture, the deck has a railing around it, and it would also require it to have a gate that closes, right, on the deck.
So that would have to have a lockable
Gate, yeah,
gate.
self-closing. Yeah.
Self-closing.
Is that in the wording?
But on which picture are you looking at?
One above
Okay.
ground pools, rules.
But
findings.
that doesn't, so then what goes around the pool
Yeah, that's,
back here
Extends
is not this.
Right, but that's not a deck around the pool. That's
right,
just an
so
extension.
you'd have both.
Yeah.
And that's something we'd want to specify, correct? In the ordinance,
Yes.
for the above ground
Yeah,
pool.
because, so like this picture right here would not, we would not require that they additionally have a 5-foot fence around
Right.
their yard.
Right.
Are you looking at diagram on page 38,
Yeah,
or?
I don't see a page number on here.
It's, yeah, the rules and
this.
This is
findings
the
above ground.
handout.
The additions for,
I mean-
it doesn't have a number.
Well, I was looking at this
For
one.
the
Yeah,
above
that's
ground
what I,
pool.
that's what I was
Oh.
looking at,
That's a better one.
to eliminate.
Whether this was the right one.
This one,
Okay, yeah, I was looking at this picture, if this is what you were referring to, whether it looked like
yes.
this,
No.
or whether it looked like something else, because this was,
this shows the deck
Well, in the
as well
pool
as.
stores.
that one shows- okay.
Have multiple designs and everything else. So if somebody really wants to get fancy with their above-ground pool, the pool stores have a lot of options.
So are you clear as mud?
Pardon?
Are you clear as mud?
I think I got what I need for the next meeting, so, and if not, we got Ellie to do the minutes, so I'll blame her. No, I'm just kidding. I got my notes here, so I'll be ready to go for the next meeting. It's going to be July 19th, so at least I have a month, but I'll get back to that during my associate planner's report, so.
Okay.
Okay.
And then if it's all right, I'll move on from discussing pools, just to quickly note another ordinance amendment that's in here. So if you go to the top of addition page A2, so most of the other ordinance amendments are just small capitalization corrections. However, I wanted to also point out another change, which is a part of the additions here. And you'll see section 7A 805M. This subsection aligns with other parts of the code, and it's really more of a clarification of what's allowed for rural residential uses. And so it's at the top of A2, and this was actually a part of ordinance amendments in 2020, ordinance 2004. However, it was inadvertently left out of amendment despite being adopted by the city council. Therefore, staff is proposing that the ordinance be corrected to include this subsection that was unintentionally deleted. And I don't think this is hopefully anything too controversial, and otherwise, that should be all I have for the ordinance amendments, and we can come back with something in July.
Okay.
I'm confused.
It was edited out.
Yeah, and we don't know how.
All right.
That was there.
Yep. Madam Chair, we've not had this before, but, so there has been a chat going on, asking questions.
Okay.
And I'm not sure whether we just want to read the questions so you have an idea of what the questions were being asked.
Yes.
Or whether you, okay, well, so the first one was, it says, so 48 inches sidewall with removable ladder will be permissible if these recommendations passed. And I think that was early on in the discussion, but I think you moved on from that, so you didn't really make a recommendation. And this was from Rob, and he said, above ground 48 to 52-inch sidewall is code with removable ladder. Rob, if you're on, is that a question or are you making a statement?
think he's gone.
Yeah, good evening. No, I was just referencing back to the conversation we had, I think it was 2 years ago, where it had stated that it was between 48 and 52 inches for a sidewall for above ground pool. I myself have a 16 by 32 pool. It's 52 inches above grade. By code, I don't have to have a railing around it. And in the, at least from what I know from the code, I don't have to have a railing around it, but I do. In the winter, I cover it with just a tarp style cover, and I don't have a railing over it, but I do drain it down to like 2 feet of water. So, and then the approach to get up to it, it is, I have a deck going up to it with a latch, like Julie was saying, Huntosh was saying, on the backside with one of those closable latches. So that's all I was trying to say, was just what I know of the code kind of unified around the Twin Cities was 48 to 52 inches for a sidewall height before you had to have an additional railing above the rail height. So does that help or confuse or?
No, I think that's a good clarification. Thanks, Rob. The next one says.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one is the recommendation that the sidewall height of an above-ground pool be higher than 4 feet or 4 feet or higher in order to exempt from having a fence?
It does say, if this is about, yeah, the above-ground pool, a minimum sidewall height of 4 feet. So in that regard, it'd be 4 feet or higher.
Like it doesn't have to be 4'1".
Yeah, yeah. If that was the question.
So the question is saying if it's like 36, it's only 3 feet high, then it requires a fence. Because that would be pretty scalable. If it had nothing around it, so if it was like this.
Then it wouldn't need it around it, or, okay.
We would.
And I think that's the way currently the code reads. I think it's a certain amount of gallons and a certain height that exempts them from a fence. It says the depth of the water 3 feet or greater, or 5,000 gallons. Otherwise, you need a 5-foot fence. So maybe we should look at that too.
I would look at that because.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Is it 48 inches or taller or higher than 48 inches? So I think we will have to kind of look at that language, because that makes a difference when you're doing code requirements.
Right, she's just asking if it's exactly 48 inches, is that good?
Are we talking about the minimum sidewall height?
Yeah.
Or yeah, so it's a minimum sidewall height of 4 feet, as written. So if we want to do 4 feet or greater, you know, we can change that.
Which is very significant when you're giving for us, that would be significant. Those are the last of the messages.
Okay.
All right. I think I've gone through everything. I just want to see if there's any other final questions, last thoughts from anyone regarding this.
I think I'm okay with you trying to put together everything we discussed and then re-looking at it.
Sure.
Because we said a lot of things, and so if you kind of rework that, and then we can look at it and go, okay, no, yes.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be doing that here in the middle of July, and again, I'll just give a reminder at the end of the meeting tonight. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot. Okay. Next item is public open forum. Is there anybody here that would like to address the commission? Anybody online that would like to speak during public open forum?
Yeah, this is Jennifer Waletzko. I just had a couple questions regarding the pool
Okay.
ordinance. My understanding is that as the current ordinance reads, it says that you have to have a fence if the pool's above 3 feet or less, or if it's above 3 feet or certain gallons, you have to have a fence.
Correct.
Is that correct or incorrect? Okay, so if it's above 3 feet, you have to have a fence.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay, so, but Rob was saying that if you're 48-inch sidewall, then you don't have to have a fence. Is that correct?
No, right now,
It
it
has
would
to be
have to
5
be
feet.
5 feet
The-
sidewall.
The sidewall, today, if you have a above-ground pool and it has a sidewall of 5 feet, is that considered a fence?
That doesn't exist. There's 48-inch pools and there's 52-inch sidewall pools.
But my question to the planning commission,
Is
Yep.
is that considered a fence? And our code doesn't really say that. Our code says you need a 5-foot non-climbable fence. Fence, it says, doesn't say pooled side walls, it says.
But is this pool sidewall a fence?
But it's, exactly, so that's, again, so I think it has to be clarified, because I think that is, in most people's mind, they're like, well, if I have a 5 foot, if I have a pool that has a 4-foot sidewall and I put a 1-foot gate rail around it, it meets your criteria. And
Okay.
again, does it? And that's a policy question, and if it does, then put that in the code.
So here's another twist to it, because 30 years ago, when I put my pool in, the fence had to be from water level up. Not all of, if it was a 4-foot pool, maybe only 3 of, you were only over a foot above water level, so then you had to put a 3-foot fence around it.
Okay.
Or if you had an in-ground pool or my above-ground pool that was dug into the ground, it had to be 6 feet above water level. So,
I think what Jennifer's trying to clarify is that Rob says the above
Right.
ground. So I think Rob was referring to what like other standards are and what we're going, or what we are like talking about going towards, but that's not what it currently is right now today, right?
Yeah, I think he was just telling you what standards are.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yes.
Like,
Right.
I mean, what's around the,
The barrier thing.
So I guess
is the
I was
most
looking to clarify that currently, no matter what, if it's above 3 feet, you have to have a fence. And it sounds like what Elizabeth read before was that it didn't have to have a fence if you were above 3 feet. But now I'm clarifying with everyone that if it's above 3 feet, you have to have a fence. And if it's above ground pool, you guys are discussing recommendations of if it has a 48-inch sidewall or higher, that you're exempt from the fence if you remove your ladder. Is that correct?
no, isn't it 5 feet?
yeah, the recommendation is not to deviate from, it's to stay with the 5 feet height requirement.
So if you have a sidewall of 5 feet, then you're exempt from a fence?
Sorry, I think there might be a little bit of, so we're not deviating from the 5-foot height of the pool fence. I think what Jennifer is asking is, are we discussing right now the minimum sidewall height of an above-ground pool being 4 feet or greater?
It's not.
No,
what it's not.
no.
Today, this is what the code says today. A structure or safety fencing of a non-climbable type at least 5 feet in height shall completely enclose the pool or yard containing the pool. That's today's code. And what meets the definition for a pool is a structure that is 3 feet or greater with 5,000 gallons or more. And that triggers you putting a 5-foot structure or safety fencing. So the question that came in last year was, if I have an above-ground pool and the sidewall is 4 feet and I put a 1-foot railing around it, does that meet the same criteria as a safety fencing, meaning a non-climbable fence? Our code doesn't say that.
I was the one who posed the question. I don't know if there was multiple people who posed it, but I was looking at a pool that it was either 48 inches deep or 52 inches. Those are the two options for above ground pools, 48 inches or 52. Neither of those are 5 feet. So I was looking to amend the pool ordinance such that a 48-inch sidewall or a 52-inch sidewall with a removable ladder would exempt you from having to have a fence.
That's the option.
I would say it has to go 5 feet. That's what I mean,
In that diagram where it shows the little railing
Right.
goes around the top, is that like a thing that is easy to, like, is that something that's easily attainable? Like, you can just buy it and clip it on, or you
Yeah.
have to, like, be a
yeah.
handyman? Okay.
And they sell them in various heights. So if you have a 3-foot sidewall, you can buy a 2-foot one.
Got it.
And that would eliminate the need to put a exterior separate freestanding fence.
Right.
Right.
Right,
That would become the fence.
right.
And so then, this is a very confusing conversation. So right
Well-
now, we require a 5-foot fence around any above ground or below ground pool.
Of a non-climbable type, yes, if your pool is more than 5,000 gallons and more than 3 feet in height.
Which,
May I propose that if we have a pool that is 52-inch sidewall that's not dug in, that you don't require anything further, because 52 inches is well over a 4-foot high child. I don't know, myself, I don't want to add anything to my pool. I don't want to have a goofy little fence. If my kids want to crawl out of the pool, or I need to get out of the pool, or I need to throw something out of the pool, I don't want to have a fence inhibiting that. But that's just, I don't know, I guess I just want to enjoy peacefully my pool on my property without infringement. If it's 52 inches, I feel like that's sufficient.
But if it's 5 feet, that doesn't make it 5 feet. From a previous pool owner, that my neighbor that did daycare had one just like you're describing. She loved the fact that she had to put that fence around the top, because if the kids were playing volleyball or whatever, she didn't have to go chase around the yard and pick up all the pool toys and the balls because they didn't go over the fence. So, I mean, 48 or 52, it's still not 5 feet. And if we're going to say 5 feet, then it's 5 feet. There's no deviation around that.
I mean, I understand why it might be annoying. I think whatever our fence height is that we decide is smart, then they should be consistent, because otherwise people saying, well, why can't I build a 4-foot fence if you have a 4-foot pool? So they should be consistent, whether it's, whatever we decide, the fence height, it's the barrier, simplified. There needs to be a barrier that's this high, whether it's a pool wall or a fence or something.
So if it's 5 foot and she has 48 feet of sidewall, she only needs to put up a foot.
Right.
To make it 5 feet. That's not a lot. And they're decorative. You can get very decorative ones so they look nice. Where an in-ground pool, it's the hard cover or it's a fence. So give and take.
So in playing the devil's advocate here, so say for instance, you have a deck platform built around your pool. So then in addition to that deck, you also have to have this weird enclosure.
No, if you have
Right.
if you have a deck built around that and you have like a little rail around it, you don't have to put up another one.
Well,
But what if it's not, what if it's a climbable rail?
That brings us back to the question, is a decking around a pool the same as a deck? And if
Right.
you've got a deck 4 feet off the ground, that's a safety issue.
Yeah.
And
So then you go above water level because you have a deck
well,
there.
that you do whatever height.
Minnesota Building Code makes you build railings. That's why your deck, if it's, the deck is so high, you have to have
Really?
railings.
Right, and then there's gonna be a much more than 5-foot barrier, right? Because you have the railings, and then that's not like a little, right?
Yeah, not,
Right, but then the railing is climbable as opposed to the rest is not.
a railing is not climbable.
Oh, you know what? It's just a devil's advocate, and we can play that. I say, Frank, come.
I'm just
back.
trying, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, Frank, come back with everything we discussed, because where there's a will, there's a way. And if somebody wants to get in something that you don't think is climbable, it can be done. For heaven's sakes, did anybody climb up the metal slides when they were kids instead of sliding down, you
Right.
climbed up? So, yeah.
I'm just trying to get at a space where I can have a 52-inch pool without having to have anything addition. That's what I'm trying to get to.
So
And the city of Forest Lake's our neighbor, and they only require a 48-inch sidewall with a removable ladder.
So tune in at our next planning commission meeting when Frank will have all of this put together for us, and we can kind of go through what we did and look at it from there, because we came at him with a lot of information. Judy.
And then I believe Councilmember Bush has his hand
Oh,
up.
Rob, did you have something to say?
Is this the right time? Or Janet, maybe correct me. Should I save it for the council meeting if I was going to talk additionally on this?
No, go ahead.
Meeting, or, you know.
So I just looked up the city of St. Paul's code, and it says a sidewall of an above ground pool can be between 4 foot and 5 foot height without needing a fence. So that's the city of St. Paul, the capital of Minnesota. So I just wanted to share that with the planning commission.
Okay.
Thank you.
Every city's going to be different. So
Well, I will put my 2 cents worth.
go ahead.
So I think we said, let's have keep with the 5-foot wall fence. What's our rationale for that? Because we think that a kid could get over a 4-foot fence. But with the in-ground or the above-ground pool, is it as easy to pull yourself up and get over? And so then that's why we just want to stick with the 5 feet. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it happens. I've seen it. So when you've had a pool and your kids are growing, you see all the things that they can do that you didn't think was possible.
You know, I think we need to go back to what is our goal here? Are we just trying to protect 2-year-olds, or are we trying to prevent drownings?
Well, in St. Paul, because they have a 4-foot, that's where, I lived, and 3 little girls went to a neighbor's pool when they weren't home. They had a fence around it. They opened the gate and they drowned. So I think that it's not just 2-year-olds drowning, it's teenagers that are going to go do whatever. And
So our goal is to make it as difficult and as safe as we can.
we want our community to be safe.
Okay.
All right.
So, anything else?
Not for now.
I don't know if this is still public open forum, but at what point is it overkill for the city to go above and beyond all the other cities
Yeah, just like in the.
rules and regulations.
Well, so I'll just say this, in Forest Lake and St. Paul, they have some of them have smaller yards. Kids walk by all the time. We're out in the country. I drove by a pool on my way here today, sitting way out in the front, the house sits way in the back, and their ladder is up and they're not swimming in it. And so we have to, we're a little different when it comes to that. Our lot minimum is different than in town.
That's what I'm getting at, is that we are rural. We don't have as populated. If somebody comes onto my property, I'm gonna notice them far sooner than they get to my pool.
Yeah, well, if your pool's not right by your house, you wouldn't know it. So let's revisit this in 2 weeks, because we've had a lot to talk about, and I want to see what the works in motion look like. So I'll close the public open forum. Any planning commissioners have a report to give? I would like to say thank you to Janet, because tonight is her last night as our council liaison.
Do we know who's next up?
Speed.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Anybody else? So now associate planners report.
All right, I'm sorry, but I do have a few more things. First, I would also like to thank Councilmember Hegland for being liaison for the City Council. I wanted to give a reminder that actually we will be getting to this at the July 19th meeting. There's no meeting on July 5th. So we will just be having one planning commission meeting in July. And for the planning commission members and city council members that requested maps, we do have the maps here today. So I'm happy to distribute those to everyone. And I think that is it for me, unless there's any question from the planning commissioners.
Thanks for getting the maps.
You can thank. So one final thank you from Janet, actually. We should give her credit.
Thank you.
I just happened to be in town, so I
Good.
Well, if there's nothing further, I would look for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So this is Judy. I make a motion to adjourn.
This is Bethany, I'll second.
Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Judy, aye.
Barb, aye.
Bethany, aye.
Lynn, aye. Meeting adjourned.
Recording stopped.
7:24.